we have to be careful here because most of the news that we're getting is from the Israeli side because internet communications are limited in Gaza. Uh, it is true that 50,000, according to Israel, got out of Gaza City, but remember that Gaza has a population of 2.3 million, and many of those folks live in Gaza City and cannot get out. There's no way. The elderly, people who are in hospitals, people who have small children, they are effectively trapped. And it's important to note that nowhere in Gaza is safe. 30% of the deaths in Gaza, I should say killings in Gaza, since October 7th have been in the south of the Strip, not in the north where the fighting's taking place. So as long as Israel is carrying out airstrikes and bombing across the entire Strip, and they did so again yesterday, then you might have a few people who move from north to south, but in no way are we talking about most of Gaza's population being sheltered from the ongoing violence.
Well, the UN's Human Rights Commission has accused both Israel and Hamas of war crimes, but how much of a difference do these words make in this ongoing conflict?
Well, I don't think that any set of words right now, even though those words might reflect reality, because in my opinion, there have been crimes against humanity on both sides. Hamas with mass killing of Israeli civilians and foreign nationals on October 7th, Israel with mass killings for the month after that, including, well, thousands, many thousands of civilians in Gaza. But the Israeli War Cabinet almost 2 weeks ago made its decision to expand the bombing and to launch the ground offensive. And they effectively said, we're willing to risk international ties at this point. That said, it is important for accountability at some point that independent, impartial investigators are able to assess and are able to freely cite what may have occurred on both sides in terms of crimes against humanity, because even if we can't stop it now, perhaps it might give one side or the other pause before doing it again.
And Scott, are negotiations continuing over the release of hostages being held in Gaza?
There's a lot of chatter that's come out today, which is the idea of 15 hostages being released in exchange for a 1 to 3 day humanitarian pause. That is in talks which Egypt and Qatar have been brokering for some time, and including Western diplomats. Those channels are being kept open, and that's important, but I'd be very cautious about seeing any result. First of all, Benjamin Netanyahu has just given another strident statement, which said, no ceasefire of any kind until all hostages are released. Now, that leaves open the door for a humanitarian pause, but that might be quite limited. But second, and here's the fundamental factor, you cannot release hostages while there is a war going on. There is no place to release them to which is safe. In fact, the reality is that unless there is a humanitarian pause, those hostages and indeed those civilians in the northern part of Gaza and to some extent throughout the Strip, they continue to be expendable.
When you say expendable, just can you clarify a little bit more, give a little bit more context in whose eyes? Who thinks these people are expendable and what's behind this view?
Well, the United Nations says they're expendable when it cited the fact that we are in one of the gravest humanitarian crises in decades, both with the killings and the ongoing suffering in terms of lack of food, lack of water, lack of basic supplies. A number of international governments have implied or said outright that civilians and hostages are expendable. Indeed, we've had the first call this morning from the Belgian deputy prime minister, the first call from a leading politician in a government saying that sanctions should be issued against Israel. But as an analyst, again, let me be honest with you. You can either have a humanitarian pause, which allows talks to release the hostages and allows aid to reach civilians who are in overcrowded shelters with lack of food, lack of basic supplies, or you can have bombing and a ground offensive. You cannot have both at the same time. So when the Israeli War Cabinet made its choice, yes, despite its public position that it wants to get all hostages back, those hostages and those civilians are, well, let's use that horrible phrase from the first Gulf War in 1991, at risk of becoming collateral damage, with Israel's main objective of, quote, destroying Hamas.
Well, if Israel achieves its goal of destroying Hamas, what will a post-war Gaza look like in the eyes of the US?
Well, I think in the eyes of the US, and again, most of the international community, including Australia, part of the concern is that we don't know what a post-war Gaza would look like. Benjamin Netanyahu, for the first time a couple of days ago, said, well, a post-war Gaza might include a protracted Israeli security zone. Now, that's code for occupation, just like you have Israeli occupation of parts of the West Bank. That does not lead to long-term stability, as we have seen. But the broader issue is that much of Gaza will be destroyed, whatever happens. It will have an entire generation of people who have been wiped out by this, and you will not have clear leadership. Will it be the Palestinian Authority who takes over from Hamas? They are not liked by many people in the West Bank where they rule. Will it be some other more extremist Palestinian group? Will an international force go in to try to take control of Gaza? Benny Gantz said a few weeks ago that if Israel was going to go into Gaza, it needed an exit plan. He is part of the war cabinet. But guess what? Neither Benny Gantz nor Benjamin Netanyahu nor their war cabinet colleagues have put that exit plan out. And I think they probably won't be able to.
Scott Lucas, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. Really appreciate your time as always.
Thank you, and thank you, viewers.